So, it's the end of yet another week, and here on this channel, that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend, I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week based on what's going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week, a lot has been going down in the NBA world as some slow starting teams and players have gotten things into gear, big matchups have been going down, rumors of trades possibly coming are on the horizon, the standings are starting to shake out, and we're starting to get a good picture of where things are going, so we definitely have plenty to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now, so if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Tangy, and he says that Karl-Anthony Towns is the main problem with the Timberwolves at this point, and they would be better off trading him in order to restock on some of their lost assets. Through about 20 games or so, there are a ton of teams currently hovering around the 500 mark, and with the Timberwolves currently having 10 wins and 9 losses, it's hard to say that they've been a disappointment so far, but at the same time when you watch them play, you can just tell that something isn't right there. They have good wins against teams like the Cavaliers and the Heat, but they also have a few really bad losses against teams like the Hornets and the Spurs, and even some of their wins against shorthanded opponents have looked a bit dicey throughout those games. This offseason, they took a huge swing on the trade market when they packaged most of their available assets in order to acquire defensive stalwart Rudy Gobert, because the team did need defensive improvement, and to be fair, Rudy has definitely helped them on that end of the floor. The Wolves were ranked 13th defensively last year, and now they're ranked 8th in the league this year on defense, so in that regard, things are working. However, last year the Wolves were the 7th best offense in the NBA, and now this year they sunk all the way down to being ranked 19th in the league on offense, and this is the downside of that trade. The roster construction of this unit just doesn't seem to be an ideal fit, which is a concern I have been vocalizing since the offseason, because adding Gobert has moved Karl-Anthony Towns to the power forward position, which just isn't a position he should be forced to play full time. However, at the same time, no defense is ever going to be ranked top 10 with him anchoring it at the center spot, so it's a weird juxtaposition. Centers are the most important players when it comes to building a good defense, which is why you typically see centers winning the Defensive Player of the Year award. Offensively, the team is slightly better when Towns is on the court, but the team improves overall and defensively according to defensive rating and net rating when Karl-Anthony Towns goes to the bench. And when you combine that with watching them play, it makes sense, because modern NBA teams' design are drifting away from Twin Towers lineups for a reason. The original take here is probably going too far by saying that he's the main problem, because he hasn't been bad by any means, but the makeup of the roster is not built to utilize their best assets, and in the modern game, Gobert's talents have typically proven to be more impactful on winning basketball games than what Towns provides. The next take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Zach, and he says that Ben Simmons is finally starting to look like the player that he was supposed to be for the Nets, so now they just need to get the rest of their rotations sorted and their role players in check. We're all well aware of how slowly Ben Simmons' season started this year, as he didn't score in double digits in a single game in his first 9 games, and half the time wasn't even considering looking at the basket to take a shot. However, slowly but surely, he has been finding his footing again, and his production is also steadily increasing in recent weeks. In his last 6 games, Simmons has scored in double figures in each of those 6 games, plus he's even scored 20 or more points in 2 of them. Now, I realize this is a pretty low bar we're setting here because Simmons is a former multiple-time All-Star, so scoring in double figures shouldn't exactly be the barometer that we judge players of his skill level at, but at the very least it does demonstrate that he's ramping things up a bit and is making more of an effort to get his groove back. So going back to the original take here, there is some accuracy to him saying that Ben is starting to play at the level that the Nets expected from him when they traded for him. However, it hasn't necessarily translated to winning impact yet, and despite Ben individually posting better numbers, the Nets have recently still been losing games against teams like the 76ers without any of Joel Embiid, James Harden, or Tyrese Maxey playing, and then they lost again last night to the Indiana Pacers, who have a good young team but by no means are a team that should be beating them. When we get to the second part about him blaming the role players for the team's struggles and how they need to get that part of the roster in check, I'm not quite sure I fully like that notion at all. The Nets have a superstar in Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving when he plays is an electrifying star-scoring talent, and Ben Simmons is expected to be a two-way star as well. As we just saw in their game against the Pacers, though, the same issues that Ben had in Philadelphia are still here in Brooklyn. When the game gets tight in crunch time down the stretch, the ball is going to be in the hands of your star scorers. Joel Embiid had the ball in his hands more, and Simmons would often become useless when he was in Philadelphia because he's not a floor spacer off the ball, and he clogs the paint because he has to hover around the basket when he doesn't have it. Now the ball is in the hands of Durant and Irving down the stretch of games, and what is Ben Simmons doing in crunch time? Yet again, a whole lot of nothing. The same excuses have been made for him throughout his entire career, but time and time again, in big moments, Simmons gets rendered useless because of those glaring weaknesses. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Wolfpack, and he says that the Bulls made a big mistake by giving Zach LaVine a max contract extension this offseason. I made an entire video on the current state of the Bulls earlier this week, so a lot of this has already been touched on in more detail in that video, but there are certainly several reasons for concern right now in Chicago. Zach LaVine's rise to stardom was the biggest reason why the Bulls sped up their timeline towards playoff contention, but ultimately, a lot of the moves that they made in that time have been things that will now hold them back moving forward. Of course, hindsight is always 20/20 in these scenarios, because at the time, for example, trading for Nikola Vucevic seemed like a fantastic move because he was one of the most productive big men in the NBA at the time, fresh off of an all-star appearance, but currently his production is down drastically, and it's looking like his best days are behind him. DeRozan signed a 3-year deal worth less than the max, so there's nothing bad to say about that considering the fantastic production that he's been giving them, but overall, the makeup of this Bulls team just is not good enough to make a deep playoff run, and the LaVine extension solidifies their cap being tied up into this core of players. I'm not saying LaVine didn't deserve the money either, because he's been with them since their lowly rebuild days, so in that regard, I disagree with this specific take, but overall, the Bulls have made plenty of other mistakes that have just compounded into a middle-of-the-pack ceiling for the team. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes we just discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.